Welcome to OK Now What? I'm your host, Kate Gladdin, episode 24. This is the show for people who know life doesn't happen to you. Life happens, and the impact it has is up to you. Hey, you little legends. Thank you for joining me for another episode, and I'm excited to be bringing back another guest to interview. And this one's kind of fun. It kind of came out of nowhere from my love of Pilates kind of reigniting about a year or so ago. I got back into my reformer Pilates classes, and then as we moved out of town, I was like, oh, what would it be like to own my very own reformer? And then I got on Google and got completely overwhelmed by how many different reformers there are out there. But after lots and lots and lots of researching, just ask my husband. I'm a little OCD sometimes when it comes to making purchases. But I stumbled upon Flexia and their reformers, and I took a leap of faith and got my own Flexia reformer, which I'm absolutely loving. But one of the coolest parts has been kind of making a new friendship and connection with the absolutely wonderful owner and founder of Flexia, Kaleen Canevari. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure, and I really thank you for giving up this time to meet with me. We had a great chat. I know at the end of last year, and really got to know each other's stories better. And as I got to learn your story behind what kind of brought you to creating Flexia, I was like, more women out here need to hear this because so easy to overthink your life and go, oh, I'm going to do this one day, and one day becomes never. So, tell us a little bit about, first of all, I want to ask before we kind of reveal kind of all the risk and entrepreneurship that you've shown over the last few years. What got you into Pilates? Because you do have a very Pilates background. Where did it all begin for you?
Yeah, I do have a Pilates background, like kind of all over the place. I am a mechanical engineer by training, and I got a job at some point in my career working as an engineer for a Pilates equipment manufacturer. And I started taking classes as a way to learn more about what I was working on.
Mhm.
Fell in love. It changed my life. I'm an athlete. I had two knee surgeries, totally changed my chronic pain. And I just fell in love and I was like, I have to learn how to teach this.
Mm.
So for about 10 years now, I've had a foot in the technical side of Pilates, whether it's as a design engineer or an equipment technician, or now the founder of Flexia, and also teaching. And I taught in studios, and now I also teach on the Flexia platform. So my life for the last 10, 12 years has been very much Pilates, and I
I
love it.
That's awesome. And just for anyone out there that because I know people they probably hear of Pilates, but I guess it's not like, I mean, it's growing in popularity and everything, but someone who's kind of been curious to try it but a little nervous, but like, I don't know, like, why do you recommend they just take the plunge, try it out? Like, what benefits do you get from Pilates that you can't get from, let's say, like weight training or yoga? Like, what's different about Pilates?
Well, it's one of those things that is I'll try and explain it, but you have to experience it too. And it's some combination of resistance training and mobility training,
Mm.
and very, very much a mindful movement. So can you get your body to do what we're asking it to do? You might think of this in like kindergartners terms as, is this your lift your right hand? No, 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 your other right hand, right? Can you process those kinds of cues in your body, but also do you have a sense of where it is in space? And
Mm.
Pilates is fantastic for building strength and mobility in an even way throughout your body. And that's a thing that is really hard to find in sometimes other fitness modalities. So, low impact is a great way to describe Pilates. And you might think, well, spinning's low impact or rowing's low impact. But those are all very repetitive motions. And the beauty about Pilates is that get your body moving in all directions so that it counteracts the repetitive stuff you're doing. Like if you're sitting at a desk all day, or if you're gardening, or if you're welding, or if you're, walking, like
Yeah.
the things our body is so good at adapting, and Pilates, our body is so good at adapting, and it will adapt to whatever we do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that can shut off or eliminate other movement possibilities for us. And Pilates just helps balance all of that out. And for
Yeah.
me, it keeps me energized, hiking, dancing, pain free.
Yes. Oh, I've so experienced that. I kind of got back into it when my massage therapist was like, oof, your back and lower back. And I just think I was doing so much just like lifting, which I love. I love heavy lifting and like, grr, like the challenge of it. But I got into my 30s. I'm not saying it's old, but suddenly you realize like I do need to start thinking about what do I want my body to be like 20 years from now, not just like what's fun today. And so she suggested Pilates. And I know there's something about when your feet are in the straps and you're just going up and down, and it just is so therapeutic. And it's nice, like you said, like I get myself in some positions where I'm like, what am I actually doing right now? But it feels good to be breaking out because I am someone who sits at a desk so often, or I'm on an airplane with my backpack hunched. I always know when I've done that. I'm like, oh, I need to straighten out my shoulders. But yeah, amazing for flexibility, posture, but also strength. Like it burns. It's not easy. It definitely gives your muscles a good go too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that I think is one of the differentiators. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's like yoga on a machine," but I think Pilates is a little bit more scalable. It can scale down to give you more support.
Mm-hmm.
Body weight is a lot for some people, and then it can scale up to make things more challenging. And
Yes.
that just it just meets you where you're at, and I love that.
Yes, yeah, and it definitely gets challenging when I've done some of your classes. You can't say you were my friend
Yes.
in that. Okay, so now that we've raved about how awesome Pilates is and why anyone who's listening, go try it. Go find a local studio. Just give it a go. What have you got to lose? So we highly recommend that. But you said so. You started out as a Pilates reformer and mechanic, something like that in that industry.
hmm
And now you run your very own company, making your own Flexia reformers. So take us a little bit on that journey because it's very different working in a company as opposed to just starting and running your own company.
I think I started out as a sponge in the Pilates world at the manufacturer as a new teacher, trying to sop up every bit of information about what um, the experience is like, what the industry is like. And as I got deeper and deeper into it from behind the scenes in many cases, I saw a lot of things that I wanted to change. And I started trying to change those things. And one of the things, for example, I really wanted to change was how women were supported as typically business owners and teachers in the Pilates world. I wanted to change how they were supported and how empowered they felt to talk about and get help with their equipment maintenance. It sounds unsexy, but these are like really expensive things that are critical for running your business. They can last decades. And yet there's no real person other than the manufacturer to rely on for um, help in maintenance or diagnosing and fixing problems or figuring out whether it was the right machine for you. And it's never a good thing when the only authority on something is the business itself, the person profiting. And so I was able to take that and go start a small business that went all over the US and went into homes and gyms and studios to help people with their Pilates equipment. And through that experience, through teaching, I was able to do a little bit of some side projects for the manufacturer to help with more equipment, um, knowledge and experience, like produced and starred in many videos on how to take care of your equipment for a particular manufacturer, went to trade shows. And there became themes. There were themes in the industry, and there still are. Um, and I wanted to make change. And at a certain point, I couldn't make change from within the existing structures.
Mm.
My vision and their vision didn't align. The priorities weren't aligned, right? I wanted more control. And that ultimately led to saying, you know what? I know what I want to do. I want to make professional grade Pilates reformer. I want to support the consumer in their Pilates journey. And I think it's time for technology to come into this Pilates space. How can we do that? And the way to do that was start my own company. And so I started Flexia.
Yeah, you did. I love it. Tell me about because that's not like I'm sure it wasn't like you just woke up one morning and you're like, I'm just gonna do it. Or maybe you did in terms of the company, but like starting it and the vision for it. But I remember you talking about like you had a business partner or someone that you kept saying like, I'm gonna do all this market research and try and gather what people want in a reformer. Take me through that story because that was kind of, I loved how it kind of ended in a little bit of a realization.
Yeah, I think I was visiting with a friend of mine who's a software engineer, and we loved talking about tech and startups. And I was a small business owner, and he'd worked for a startup. Um, and I was telling him about the struggles in the Pilates industry and what I wanted to do and see. And I had this long list of things I wanted to discover. It was like, I want to categorize and measure all the problems we see in the Pilates studio. I want to get a survey of how long these parts last. I want to talk to, X number of customers and really learn this. And then I'm going to take all that information and I'm going to create a company like 10 years down the road. And he was like, well, do you think any of the information you gather is going to change the idea in your head very much? And I thought about it and I was like, no, actually, I have a pretty clear idea of what I want to do based on I have anecdotes and experiences from all of those areas. And he was like, well, just go for it then.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay. And he goes, and when you're ready to hire your first engineer, call me. And I was like, that's cool. Okay. Um, and that's really what sparked the initiative to stop playing it safe and like
Mm.
gathering information to be ready.
Mm.
And then, oh my gosh, actually, I'm never going to be ready. And I already have a pretty decent sense of where things are at, and I'll learn as I go.
Yep.
And that was kind of getting over the hump of um, comfort, I think.
Yep. That's the biggest thing I see in, people trying to start a business is they just start overthinking, like, kind of spinning. You've got to have, that point where it's like, all right, I've got to go from, I kind of like where your research phase into doing phase because there's things you're going to learn that you can't learn through the research or you think about it, your journey was really like 10 years of experience, like of research. You'd already done all of that. And some people aren't going to see or even understand what's possible with a reformer in the way that your brilliant brain could. Like, your engineer background with your own experiences, you could ask the market, but they probably couldn't even conceive something like a smart reformer. Like, what does that mean? While you had this, idea and vision. And I love that right in that moment you had that person beside you that could help believe in you more than you believed in yourself. Like the fact he said, call me when, there's a job ready. It wasn't if, but when you're ready to hire. That's so important. But I bet there were some doubters. Like I know within my own family, even when I first wanted to do some of the things I wanted to do, they're like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And have you thought this through? And so, how have you dealt with not even the self doubt? That's one thing. But when some people around you or even some of your closest circle have doubted you, I don't know if that's been your experience, but
I generally, my people close to me have been incredibly supportive. It's the further and further away from knowing me,
Mm,
the more doubt I faced. And that for in my situation was um is tough because I wanted to start a company that's very expensive to start. And figuring out how to raise the capital when I had lots and lots of talented, lovely people in my network, but no one with net worth that could afford to really invest
mm,
in the way that's meaningful or connect me with that kind of network. And so um the people close to me know me and were supportive, but also Pilates is a really feminized thing. I think it's getting
mm,
less so these days, but it's a very feminized thing and a little bit unknown to the demographic of people writing checks and giving business advice, which are
mm,
predominantly older white men. And and every step of the way, I've seen that manifest in the way of, well, I wouldn't replace my Peloton with your product, right? And it's like, well,
well, that's silly.
it's not for you. It's for the 80% of the country who controls spending power is
Yeah.
actually not
You.
you, consumer spending power. And so every step of the way, in that sense of going beyond my own network, has been hearing no over and over again, or hearing things like, you need to look fit to sell fit. Or I had someone say, you aren't representing the people in your marketing don't represent people who would actually buy your product. And
What the heck does that
and
even mean?
and I'm pretty sure that was veiled racism. And then I was like, what do you mean? What about them tells you that they can't afford this? And he was like, well, I've just been in marketing forever. I know. And I'm just like,
Wow.
I'm sorry. These actually are real like users.
Yeah.
It's just, it's
Yeah.
been really hard. Um, really hard to fight all the misconceptions, the misogyny in some cases. But, starting a company is hard for anybody.
Yeah.
And the further and further I got along, the thicker my skin got, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, for sure.
But, you know, some people that stuff breaks them or makes them so mad or makes them want to give up. Like, okay, they're just not ever going to listen and this isn't really going to take off. So, what was the difference? What would you tell yourself when you'd hear things like that that just had you keep moving forward rather than quit?
I think a huge advantage for me was knowing the industry and the consumer so well that I could still believe in what I was trying to do. There are a lot of people who come into startups and new businesses and jump into something that they haven't done before or aren't an expert in. Totally fine. It can work. But I think a lot of times it can create a lot of doubt
Mm,
if you let it, because you don't have those deep-seated beliefs that keep you going when
hmm
people say you're wrong and you're like, no, no, I'm right.
I've got enough evidence. I
Right?
know I'm right. Yeah.
So that's a thing. It's not universal truth, but I think that really helped me. And the second part was using those no's and allowing some of that anger to manifest in a sort of like, well, then I'll find someone who will.
Sit back and watch.
Then I'll go find someone who believes in me. I'll go find someone who, can help me.
Hmm
And it really is a testament along the way of, having so many no's and awkward conversations and I mean, learning how to end conversations early when you know they're not going anywhere, like all of those
Mm,
things, and then combined with or balanced by those magic people that, among 20 meetings, you find one person that you really connect with and just totally reignites the passion and the vision and makes you remember like this is freaking awesome.
hmm.
And yes, I'm on the right path. Like
Yeah.
those people are few and far between, but when you get them, they, it's just it's such a booster. I cling to those. In fact, I try and record or save and print emails, or I have
Mhm.
little envelopes of things that have been written to me, or so that I can sort of collect these things that make me feel the passion or the companionship, because that can be really lonely.
Mhm.
And I try and save those things because it's really, really easy for me to feel all of the no's overwhelm
Yeah.
the momentum.
Oh, I feel you on that one. Being in like the speaker industry where I'm constantly pitching myself too, and it's no, 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 or sometimes it's not even a no, you just hear nothing. It's
Yes.
and
Hearing nothing. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and you've got to feel that void. Like, why do I keep that's it. You got to feel it with your why, your passion, it's just like with every talk that I give, because you know, I'm not for everyone and I've got to accept that's okay. Like people resonate with different personalities and messages, but I just tell myself if there's one person in this room that I can connect with and help, like that's worth it. And I know you've helped far many more than that, but you've got to, I was delighted when my Flexia showed up, and I'm very glad you persevered, because not only have you created a great reformer, but like a great community too that is so inclusive and doesn't matter why you're working out, what you like, where you come, anything. It's just so awesome to see. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to chat about too, like the online classes. So you kind of have like an online Pilates on demand studio with all the recorded classes. But chat to us just a little bit about the smart part of Flexia. So you're the first in the world to create a smart reformer. Just explain what that means and why you feel like that's like an important thing to add to a reformer.
Yeah. The If you've seen a reformer, even through a window, even if you're not a Pilates person, they're big. They're like the size of a couch. They've got all these some straps and springs, and it can look a little bit like a torture device. And
Sometimes it
and
is.
well, there's good torture, and then there's torture, and there's intimidation. There's an intimidation factor to it. Um, and one of the things I notice is that, there's, unlike other fitness equipment, there's literally no data you can get from a Pilates machine. The instructor is the gatekeeper for getting feedback about your practice. And that's
Mm,
not bad or good. It just is a thing. The instructors are typically very well trained, highly trained. Um, but it leaves the person doing Pilates a lot of times without a sense of continuity of progress being made, which can impact motivation, which can
mm,
take away some autonomy. And I don't think that I wanted to change that. So
mm,
that's one piece. I wanted to empower the consumer. The other piece is um, Pilates is studied, but it can be hard to study because there's not a way to measure things other than qualitatively. And in fact, if you read meta-analyses of research, one of the biggest problems is not being able to standardize the kind of Pilates being taught.
mm,
And so there's this everything I think about really comes back to how do we measure the magic of Pilates?
mm,
And this isn't so simple as putting on a smartwatch, right? A lot of
mm,
people go to Pilates, will take an hour long class, be feeling awesome at the end. They may or may not have sweat. It depends. The teacher's like, hey, great job. And as you're putting your shoes on after class, you look at your smartwatch and you're like, oh man, I only burned 100 calories in an hour.
Yeah.
It's like, well, Pilates isn't cardio,
No. Unless you do
right?
your jump board class.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise.
I mean, you can get your heart rate up,
Yeah.
but that's not the
The permanent.
magic of Pilates isn't that you get your heart rate up.
Mm-hmm.
The magic of Pilates is being in control of your body and moving through lots of different movements in different ranges of motion. Basically, can you do what the instructor is asking you to do? And so I started thinking about, well, what's that feedback loop like in the instructor's head? What does an instructor do that we take for granted in a studio that we can measure? And of course, everybody's brain goes to, well, form is really important in Pilates. I need to measure form. So you need a count. No, 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 no. Back up, back up, back up. So in Pilates, I want to know, do you have the right weight settings? And are you moving at about the right speed I'm asking? And can you do it consistently throughout the entire set I'm asking you to do it? That is the foundation that you have to build before you can ever really tell someone, like, hey, your right hip is lower than your left hip. Let's make a little change, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to get the foundation of movement right. And actually, that's the 80% gain. The 80, the Pareto
Mm-hmm.
principle. 80% of the benefit of Pilates is that autonomy. And I said, well, we can measure that. We know what we're teaching in the online studio. We know this exercise. We put some sensors on the moving part of the machine, and we can measure what's happening and then compare that to what we expect to happen. So basically, it's answering the question, are you doing what I asked you to do? And now we can go, if you are doing that, you're competent. Hey, maybe you want more challenge. And if you aren't doing that, and it's a struggle, then we can say, hey, let's back things off a little bit so that we can get you in the zone where
Mm-hmm.
you're showing competency.
Yeah.
And what that can do is not only score people, but it can give the end user, person doing Pilates, it can help them learn to be a little bit more self-sufficient,
Mm-hmm.
deepen their own practice um, with a language and some numbers that mean something. And so that's basically what we've done. Put sensors on a professional grade machine, developed classes. So now in this environment, you can get feedback about how you're moving on the Pilates machine.
Brilliant. It's so, I don't know, I love it. And I love looking at like my numbers too and like what I'm, kind of what I'm thinking if I'm not like taking it in, how it feels versus the feedback. And I think it's yeah, I think it was like the missing piece, which is what entrepreneurship is. It's seeing something that, where there's a gap or something that you could feel. And I love that it's not like a camera-based thing either. I don't know, that one would have been a bit strange. I just like that it is on the, I mean, never say never. I'm not saying there's someone out there that won't do it, or maybe you add that in, but I think like just the sensors itself and getting that biometric kind of feedback is really, it's helpful and you still give instructions though too. It's not like you leave us hanging. Um, the biggest one of all in Pilates is often to remember to breathe.
Yes.
I, sometimes it's like that, but there's still that like I still feel like I'm almost in a studio with you when I do your classes and like all the things you have online. So I was genuinely like, what's this going to be like? Because I like one of my teachers is actually a good friend. Like I love going in and seeing her in studio and stuff. So I was like, is it really going to feel like I'm missing? But it's even fun getting to know all your different personalities and styles. And so it's really, I think, as I said, not just like a reformer, but to have that like sense of community and familiarity with the teachers. If you keep showing up, you got to make sure you still do the
Yes,
classes.
yes, yes.
So.
And I think that is we're still so early. And the whole idea the teachers, the community, the feeling, all of that stuff is hard to quantify. Like we don't, we're in the infancy of discovering and developing what kind of data and metrics we can get out of Pilates. But at the end of the day, there are things that can't be measured yet.
Mm.
And they're important. And so I don't think it's ever going to be all one way or the other, I don't, and I would, even though I sell to people who want to work out in their homes, like I would never discount the value of going into a studio either.
Mm.
And I think that as a self-proclaimed nerd, I think that's one of the most exciting things about starting a business. And sometimes the most frustrating to balance is like seeing all of the potential possibilities and directions that can go. I mean, this is not something that nothing worthwhile can be solved in a week or a month or even a year.
Mhm.
But the possibility to contribute to expanding the experience and the knowledge and the conversation and the language around something that millions of people love to
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
it's just so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. No, I'm very grateful that I stumbled upon you guys. I was, not to discount any other reformer machines out there, but
You can discount them, that's okay.
no, I'm a Flexia girl through and through now. Don't you worry. I'll highly recommend. I actually had someone in my hometown kind of message me on Insta like, "What do you think of it?" And I was like, "It's no regrets because I've got to admit, like, it isn't a cheap investment. Like, we just bought a house, and I'm like, oh boy." But I knew that I could overthink it for the next 6 months or just dive in, and I think it was honestly just you could tell that you were genuine. Like, I don't know, I felt something that even when I went on your website, it was professional, but it was also like approachable and kind of really spoke to me as a Pilates lover and all of that stuff. So, um, anyone listening, if you happen to be looking for a reformer, I very much recommend it. I have my discount code of Kate that gets 550 off is it your all-in-one bundle? Yes, which you want all in one because you got all the goodies then, like the oh my gosh, I'm mind blanking. What is it? The box. Oh my gosh, I keep
Yes.
trying to call it the chair. It's the box and the platform and the jump board.
Yes, Kate. Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh, words are failing me today. Okay, let's see. Well, before I let everyone know, like you can kind of give Flexia a shout out or if they're wanting to learn a little more. But what if you could go back? Gosh, how long ago did you start this journey?
2020,
Okay. Oh, that was a fun year.
just before COVID.
Oh wait, before I ask this question, there was another one I wanted to ask because I just think it's like listening to you being like, I had to go raise capital. I'm like, oh, that sounds like so Wall Street like. But so what is it like? Like, how do you like where do you go to raise capital if someone's like got a business idea? I'm sure I'm opening up a huge can of worms. You kind of give me like I'm just curious, what's that process like, especially as a female? Like,
Well, women get 2.7% of all venture capital funding.
no way.
2.7. It's a tough world out there for women in venture capital. Um, but generally it's about networking. And I started with the local startup community in the city I was living at the time and just kind of gradually got bigger at that looking at, so I learned from them. I heard their questions. I heard, what they wanted to see. That prompted me to take other action. That
Mm,
action turned into things that I could talk about with bigger
mm,
networks. And ultimately, I got into a tech startup called Techstars Sports. And that was really, really impactful because I was someone who started a company not knowing anything.
Which
I didn't have
sometimes
a
isn't a
net.
bad thing.
No,
Sometimes your
no, no, yeah.
naivety of
I
how
mean,
hard it is. It's
if
good.
I had known, but that um it comes back to that not letting the fear stop you. Because even though I probably looked and I definitely was naive, I still got stuff done.
Mm.
And it was almost sometimes it could be described as failing forward, just doing
Mm.
things, just doing things. They might fail. Okay, great. Data point. Keep
Yeah.
going. Um, but really, in terms of raising money, the network is super important, and talking to the right people is really important.
Yeah.
And at the time that I raised my biggest round, um, being able to talk to investors specifically in the fitness space was incredibly important. I could have the same conversation with someone in the industry and someone who um, is not, and they would ask completely different
Mm.
questions and they would see the value of what I'm building completely differently. And
Mm.
so it's that thing that saying, if you can't expect a fish to ride a bicycle really well, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever. Like there's some, I can picture the cartoon, right?
Yeah.
You have to know, you have to be in the right places. And
Yeah.
finding those places can be really frustrating. And then you have to have a lot
Mm.
of advocates, and especially in my case, a lot of male advocates who would open doors for me.
Yeah.
Um, because people come into meetings with me with different biases
Mm-hmm.
than people like, you know, the founder of Peloton, who's a white man. Like most of the comparable companies are very much white men. So
Mm.
um, it's just that's part of navigating the world
Yeah.
broadly. It's just a little bit more of a boys club. But it comes back to finding the right people
Yeah.
who really amplify you, whether it's making you come alive with that passion or opening doors or connecting you with, a stellar marketer or whatever, right? Like that networking. I never paid attention to networking before I started a business.
Yeah. And
And
then,
it's kind of a dirty word almost
yeah.
because it sounds so disingenuous. Is that
Mm.
a disingenuous?
That sounds good.
Um, it sounds so disingenuous, but making friends and
Yeah.
talking about the ideas and the possibilities, that's ultimately where progress gets made. And in my case, that helped with the funding as well as all the other
Oh,
aspects of
yeah.
my business.
Yeah. But I love what you said about, the, networking piece, because it does somewhat sound like you're just trying to get things from other people. But I also think it's like just that connection, that flow of value and exchange of information and support both ways. And, my journey in a business doesn't have like, I'm not having to knock wood together and make machines. Like I don't have like material expenses and stuff in that way. So I haven't had experiences as much in the capital raising. That's why I was curious, like how that all works. But in terms of, what you mentioned about just like making friends, like that's part of what, made me want to reach out is like, hey, like I'm a female businesswoman too. And selfishly, I just wanted to be inspired by your journey and learn more, about it and just kind of feel more seen and understood like, oh my gosh, our journeys are so different, but some of those moments that you've shared and hearing the no's and the doubt and even just not knowing what you're doing in the beginning, like it's I don't know, I really relate to that. And so thank you for sharing that so openly and genuinely and just giving us so much inspiration in life and also go try Pilates, people. It's awesome.
Yes, listen to Kate.
Yeah. And if people are curious to learn more about Flexia, where should they go?
You can go to flexiapilates.com or find us on Instagram, Flexia Pilates. And also, we've got some good content on YouTube. If you just want to tootle around, try some workouts, there's some
Oh, you
stuff
know
to
what else?
discover.
Actually, I remember too why I loved, like why I went for Flexia is I watched your comparison videos between your machine and other brand machines, and so I found it really helpful. And I think one of the things that, like you said, I created this because this is what I felt like was missing in a machine that I know so well. And I like that really like, okay, she's like taken, or she like, I don't know, it hit me now. I'm like, yes, that was a really cool thing too, to actually meet the founder and why behind every choice that you made on the machine was really cool. So I know that's on YouTube because I found it one day.
Love to hear it.
I love it. Well, and I'll put the link to Flexure in that in the show notes. So if you're interested, guys, just click on that and you can go straight to it. But thank you so, so much again, Kaleen. I'm really excited to watch Flexia take the Pilates world by storm.
Thank you for having me, Kate. I appreciate it.
Hey, you, thanks so much for tuning into this show. If you enjoyed listening along, but you're still thinking, Kate, how do I actually put all of this into practice in my own life with my own situations? I totally get it. This stuff is somewhat simple in theory, but a lot harder in practice, which is why I offer one-on-one personalized life coaching for women just like you who are ready to get unstuck, end the overwhelm, and take back control of their life. That's right. I know that's you. Let's get back to creating a life, body, relationship, and career that you love. Visit theresilientspeaker.com for more details on my coaching. That is theresilientspeaker.com. And for extra inspiration in between episodes, make sure you join me on Instagram. It's at Kate Gladdin.